I just want to say that I am extremely proud of all of y'all for really being what's on the front of your shirt, Disruptivators, man. You guys have been exposing yourselves to different things. I haven't seen anyone be apprehensive or hesitate to try any of the things that we've been putting before y'all. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, you got to expose yourself to new things, new concepts, new opportunities to grow. You know what I'm saying? That's one of the most essential things about being a leader. You got to grow. You got to grow, all right? So, without further ado, everybody help me welcome Dr. Adam Meadows, psychiatrist who works with Skyland Trail. Y'all make some noise for the moderator. Turning pain into passion this morning.
Mic check. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Good
Yeah,
morning.
already.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Disruptivators. How y'all feeling? Yeah? Show of hands. Who's having an amazing time so far? Yes. Awesome. Well, listen, my name is Dr. Adam Meadows. I'm a psychiatrist that works with Skyland Trail. And today we're going to talk about turning pain into passion. So what I do professionally is work with people who are in pain every day, going through stress, depression, anxiety, real life struggles. And you're going to hear from three awesome panelists this morning who have dealt with personal pain and translated that into passion and success. So who am I and why am I here? So my story actually starts here in Marietta, Georgia. I grew up here in East Cobb. Do we have any Marietta natives here in the house? Yes? One at least? All right, awesome. So grew up in East Cobb, went to Wheeler High School, and then left, right? Wheeler Wildcat? Awesome. And so Wheeler High School, and then went to a small school in Michigan called Andrews University, where I achieved a 4.0. After that, transitioned out to a medical school called Washington University in St. Louis, one of the top medical schools in the country. After that, went to University of Pennsylvania, where I was chief resident studying psychiatry. And I say these things to you guys humbly. I'm not here to brag or for self-promotion, but I say that to inspire you, because each of you has the same potential. You guys are bright, talented, creative, and you're here for a purpose. So I just want to clap it up for you guys. A round of applause for all of you being here today. Okay? And for those of you guys who have notepads, just want to give you 3 quick points. Then I'm going to bring up the panelists to go ahead and get today's talk started. So the 3 quick points are, whatever you do it with excellence, right? Don't be afraid to go all in and put all of your passion, all of your energy into whatever drives you, whatever inspires you, okay? Second point, never stop learning. So even though I've been through 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 4 years of psychiatry residency, a lot of training, I'm still learning, right? I found a way to be perpetually curious, to always be searching, exploring, looking for new ways of thinking and solving problems, okay? So that was the second point. And lastly, learn to say yes and then find a way, right? Very often, self-doubt gets in the way and we question ourselves and we hold ourselves back. But I promise you, more opportunities and more success will come your way if you learn to say yes first. Say yes to yourself and then find a way, okay? How's that sound? Deal? All right. So now I'm going to bring up our 3 amazing panelists today to get into the topic of how to turn your pain into passion. Coming up to the stage first, please welcome Starshell. She is a singer, songwriter, and actress. She's written for acts such as Kanye West, Mary J. Blige. She's toured with J-Lo and started a birthday girl brand after a personal family tragedy. Please welcome Starshell to the stage. All right. And next we have Mr. Brandon B'Mike Odums. B'Mike is a visual artist and filmmaker. You may have seen some of his productions on MTV, VH1, BET. He's done murals throughout New Orleans. He's the founder-director of Tucson Entertainment, which provides mixed media workshops and youth social enterprise. Please welcome Brandon to the stage, ladies and gentlemen. And last but not least, we have Miss Kate Atwood. She is the founder of Kate's Club and currently the executive director of Choose ATL. She's been featured in People Magazine, The Huffington Post, and The Today Show. And she also experienced a personal tragedy at a young age, which then led to the foundation of her nonprofit, Kate's Club. Please welcome Kate to the stage, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So first, thank you guys for being here and being a part of the panel today. And so the first question, as we consider the topic of turning pain into passion, commonly the theme of loss is a pervasive theme. We think about, emotional loss, physical loss, and even more abstract losses like loss of self-confidence or loss of direction. So to start things off, can you guys tell us about a hardship that you faced in the past that shaped who you are today that involved the theme of loss in some way? Kate, let's start with you.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Who got more than 2 hours of sleep last night? Okay, good. I followed you guys on social media yesterday. I know yesterday was a huge day, so I think we have the bar set pretty high, but I'm really excited to be here and tell you about my story. My story starts when I was 12 years old and my mother, Audrey, died. And at that age, I didn't know anybody else whose mom had died. I mean, all of our fairy tale princesses' mothers have died, but I didn't know anybody in my world who had faced loss at such a young age. I didn't talk about my mom for 7 years, not even to my best friends, and it wasn't until I was given an opportunity when I was volunteering to share my story for the first time. And in that moment, I found my voice around my grief. But the bigger thing that happened in that moment was that I turned my loss from being a victim of it to being a survivor. And that's kind of really my message today that went on to help me start Kate's Club. I started Kate's Club when I was 22 years old. I had no money. I had no fame to my name. I had no network of money. I just started putting dollars together and reaching out to get kids together who faced the similar loss of a parent or a sibling. And today, Kate's Club is the largest, what we call children's bereavement organization in Georgia. We serve thousands of kids. These are kids from all corners of the community. They are from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races and ethnicities, and they're also from different faiths. And I think my biggest message that we'll talk about today is how you can look at your loss and your adversity as something that holds you back, or you can look at it as something that gives you gifts and gives you learnings and empowers you to make the world a better place. So that is my story of turning my pain into the way that I am helping the world.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Brandon, how about you?
Hey, peace. I'm super thankful to be here. I would like to talk about, I'm from New Orleans. I feel it's the greatest city on the planet.
Uh-oh. Controversy.
So about 12 years ago in New Orleans, something happened. I'm pretty sure we're all aware of it. Hurricane Katrina hit, and so my pain had to do with more of a community pain. It was a situation where I seen my entire neighborhood, my entire way of growing up just be completely erased and destroyed on a massive scale. I evacuated here to Marietta. I lived here for a couple years, and a large part of me was processing what was happening. This was like entire shift of reality. And as an artist, I'm a visual artist, I'm a filmmaker. One of those things was to figure out how to use that as a way to equip my voice and to not just see this pain as something that was defining me, but how do I define it? Mm-hmm. A large part of that was going back to New Orleans and seeing the landscape of New Orleans and seeing space as a huge conversation. Space became a large part of what we were dealing with. Displacement, seeing abandoned property, forgotten spaces, and people who used to live there that were no longer. So as a visual artist, I began to go in these spaces. About 8 years after Katrina, I started going into these physical spaces and painting them without permission, without a green light from any official organization, or just went into these spaces illegally at first and started painting large murals on the walls. It started off at this abandoned apartment housing project in the 9th Ward. And I just went in there and painted heroes of mine, different people who are lionized in history. And I just wanted to paint these portraits in hopes that people around that space would see themselves reflected and that they would see power that comes from struggle. So I painted portraits of Malcolm X and Paul Robeson and Nina Simone. And then what ended up happening, against my own will, people started to come to this space and started to seek the work out. And other artists began to go into these spaces and paint. And we turned this one forgotten apartment complex into this underground art experience that was known as Project B. That got shut down because, once again, it was illegal. We weren't supposed to be doing that, but it got shut down. Then right after that, we went to another apartment complex and did the same thing. This one got some green light because the owners saw it and they were like, okay, we like what y'all doing. We don't understand it, but we're curious enough to kind of allow you to continue. That lasted for 3 months, and we had over 30,000 people come and visit this space. I got over 30 artists in the city to come together and recreate this property. Once that ended, then I went into this 35,000 square foot warehouse, and now currently that's where my art sits. So a big part of my story is about how do you become an alchemist and think about these painful moments as opportunities to transform. You know, we all understand the idea of turning lemons into lemonade, or like the alchemist would do, turn lead into gold, and that's what we begin to do with these properties and think about, okay, how can something as simple as paint, something as simple as our time begin to transform not only the way we look at it, but the way we look at each other. And so, yeah, and there's some images on the screen now of some of the work that was done over the past couple of years. So yeah, so that's a little bit of my story. So thank you, appreciate being there.
Awesome. Yeah, clap it up. Starshell, how about you?
Hi, guys. How are you guys doing this morning? First of all, I just want to say how proud I am to see all these young faces in this room right now, because I know it's summertime, right? Like, a lot of your friends are out just probably sleeping. They went out last night, whatever's happening, but you guys chose to be here, which is a very good decision to be here seeking knowledge and just information, because information really is power. How many of you guys are in junior high? How many of you guys are in high school? How many are in college? Okay. Those are very big transitioning times in life, and times that you'll never get back and that you'll remember and will set the precedence for the rest of your life. I turned my pain of losing my sister when I was in high school, so around you guys' age. I lost her to suicide, and prior to losing her to suicide, I had no idea that she was suffering. I had no idea that she was depressed. I had no idea that she felt like she didn't want to be here anymore. And we were just 2 years apart, so as sisters, we were thick as thieves. We were best friends. We talked about boys together. We talked about, parties and everything that you can imagine. And at that age, we had grown up from 0 until being in high school together and loving each other in that way. So it was very, very tragic for me to lose her and feel almost betrayed. Like, my best friend, how did I not know that she was going through something so deep that she couldn't even speak to me about? I'm her sister and her best friend. So after I lost her, I recognized that there's a huge problem that we all face, and it's our mental and emotional health. It's something that we keep very secretive. It's something that we can't even talk to our closest family members about. So after I lost her, I basically was like, okay, I have to do something to be a voice in the mental and emotional health space for young people. And I'm not talking about diagnosable mental illness necessarily, because that's obviously something that should be addressed, but I'm talking about things we go through every day, like breakups, or feeling like you're not pretty enough, you're not good enough, you're not successful enough, you're confused about what tomorrow holds. And so I went through college, and similar to Kate, I didn't talk about losing my sister, especially because she had committed suicide, so I didn't know how to speak about it. But I spent the time that I was in college really understanding the mind. I studied psychology, and I wanted to know the inner workings of emotions and kind of getting through your day-to-day. And then I realized that I wanted to use my talents as a writer to talk about mental health. So I went on from college to start writing with some of the industry greats, as Dr. Adam told you. I worked with Kanye West, I worked with Mary J, and every single time that I write and every time I sit down, I think about my intention, which is to help spread love and light and make people understand the stigma that's attached to mental and emotional health, and how it's up to us to start conversations to break that stigma. So that's how I used my tragedy to do something greater.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And guys, whether it's a family loss or loss of a home. You can see how a lot of that resonates with maybe some of y'all's experiences. So to the panel, as we talk about, as your careers have advanced and you go through different stressors professionally, tell us about some of your self-care strategies. How do you take care of yourselves during times of stress and maybe even prevent some of those more emotional reactions that might come along? Brandon, let's maybe start with you on that one.
Sorry, my phone keeps going off. My bad. For me, creating is a form of self-care. Just being able to process, I look at it almost like an assembly line, like processing trauma, processing pain, or processing experience, and then producing art or creating something. And that's always been a process of mine, is trying to figure out how to be empowered and emboldened by experience. And so that's like a form of stress release, a form of like release in general. An elder told me once, he said, anybody who has the audacity to be an artist has to be in intimate terms with despair. I mean, when you think about that, it's like, that's intense. But he was like, to never let despair have its last word, to always be a prisoner of hope, to think about, this despair is a part of who I am, but yet I'm gonna somehow turn it into an idea of hope. And hope is a whole lot different from optimism. Optimistic is kind of like to be blind to despair, to just pretend like it doesn't exist. But to wrestle with despair and to be hopeful is to say, okay, I know this exists, or I know this is a part of my reality, but yet somehow I'm clinging on to hope. And so for me, that process happens every time I paint. It's like a mini battle that occurs in my brain every time I pick up a paint can. Even that piece right there is like, processing a blank canvas. It's like a wrestling match. And so I appreciate every single opportunity I get to have that match. And so that's the way I kind of relieve myself from whatever I'm dealing with.
Sure. Absolutely. Starshell, how about you?
I find it very therapeutic for myself to make sure that I'm keeping integrity in everything that I'm doing, and basically it's similar to what you're saying, being expressive and staying very true to who I am. For example, I started a company called Birthday Girl, and Birthday Girl is about the one day a year that everyone loves themselves. So instead of me saying, let's talk about suicide, right, prevention and awareness, I say, let's talk about the one day a year that everyone loves you, everyone acknowledges you, everyone is so happy to celebrate your life and that you're here. So I spend a lot of my time, despite the fact that I'm a writer and I'm an artist and I'm on the road a lot, I spend a lot of time working in my Birthday Girl brand, because that's my form of expression, and that's me giving back and making sure that I'm honoring my sister and honoring my intention to spread awareness for suicide constantly. So I keep true to who I am and what's important to me, despite where I'm at in my career. It keeps me very grounded.
Awesome. Kate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key, to all of us probably, is this word expression. I think when you start to drop words like stress and anxiety and despair, I mean, these are things that creep into your life. They don't come into your life with some marquee, flashing lights, right? And I think it's so important, especially at a young age, to start to explore what that expression is. I mean, that can be movement, that can be art, that can be writing. In my case, it came in terms of helping others and volunteering with younger people. Kate's Club is a place, it's a community. We have a clubhouse facility in Atlanta where it's not sterile walls where kids come and lay on a couch and necessarily have a therapy session. It's a place where they come together and they circle around each other and they're introduced to art, to sports and recreation, to poetry and to yoga. We introduce them at a young age, these variations of expression, knowing that then when they're in that community, kind of addressing some of these things that they don't even, sometimes you don't even know the word. I mean, our emotional vocabulary is way bigger than the Webster Dictionary. And that can be overwhelming, I think, for a young person. So my advice would just be, look, we all are gonna face these things in our lives. We're all gonna face adversity. We're all gonna face stress and anxiety. Begin to explore what that expression is. And I think what you see up here is how that can even actually turn into a bigger purpose for your life, here on Earth.
Yeah, fantastic. Clap it up for that, yeah. That's great. And so for each of you, as your careers have advanced and you've progressed when you look back now, what would you guys consider your greatest achievement, either personally or professionally, that involved turning pain into passion? Starshell, let's start with you at the end.
I'm a work in progress constantly, which is what I like. I like to continue to discover myself. I find myself hugely imperfect, and I find perfection in being imperfect. So it's hard to say like what my greatest life's achievement is, but I think self-love and learning to accept myself is my greatest life's achievement thus far in my journey. Because without loving myself, I can't pursue my dreams. Without loving myself, I can't love anyone else. Without loving myself, I can't just be exactly what God has placed me here to be. So I think that journey of self-love and kind of understanding what that means in my life has been my greatest achievement.
Awesome. Yeah. Brandon?
Man, I agree. I think I'm always forward thinking, so it gets difficult to look back and say, okay, that was the point where it all made sense. But there were a few moments where I felt like things came together. I spoke earlier about the project of recreating or repainting these spaces. One particular space, it was called De Gaulle Manor. It was 360-unit apartment complex that was empty post-Katrina. This was 9 years after Katrina, and this space had sit empty, void of inhabitants of any sort, and it sat in the middle of a community trying to rebuild. So here this was a constant reminder of neglect, of pain, of just seeing yourself in this cosmos of like, oh, look at this big property that's gonna always remind me of this big, painful moment in my life. We went in as artists, 35 artists went and transformed this space, and we had small intentions in mind. We were like, you know what, we can just do something. We can make it look a little bit prettier than it was before. And I remember during that process, I couldn't even convince people to come with me back there. They were so afraid of the space or just didn't have the imagination to see what it can become. On the last day that we had that space open, we articulated to the public, like, look, this is your last chance to experience this property. And it was on MLK Day, January 19, 2014. I will always remember this day, because on this day, we walked into this space, and there was literally a line around the entire community trying to get into this space. It was 10,000 people trying to cram into this apartment complex. And the aerial view of the space was just crazy, because it was literally, you couldn't even see ground. All you saw was people. The police came to me, and they were like, you got to shut this down. Like, either you got to shut it down, or we're going to shut it down. So it was like, well, we'll close the fence. We closed the fence, and then people started to hop the fence to get in, just to be a part of this community of artists and people who were be a witness of what had occurred. We had, it was a block party. Erykah Badu came, David Banner, Dead Prez, Trombone Shorty. It was just an amazing experience, and all that brought all of us together was the art and the idea of alchemy, the idea that we all had a role in transforming this pain into art. That had to be, hands down, one of the greatest moments, because just looking out there and seeing, like, we all were a part of something, and we created this ourselves. Like, nobody wrote a check, nobody, like, it wasn't, part of a long process of hearings. It was just people coming together and saying, you know what, this is our community, and we have to see this, so let's do something to make it better. And I think I'll always reference that as what's possible. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's got to be the moment for me.
Fantastic. Kate?
I think my moment was, continues to be, my vision for Kate's Club is to build a world where it's okay to grieve. And that doesn't mean that we get to a place as a society where we just accept sadness. We think that, we erase the shame, we erase, the detriments of grief and unresolved grief. To me, a world where it's okay to grieve is a world where we understand our gifts. We understand the learnings and the things that come from loss that are more empowering, such as compassion, such as empathy, such as love, right? So right now, that world is really only in this, in some ways, small part of the world called Georgia. However, to me, that is success, because that will continue to grow. And when we have our kids at Kate's Club, and we have kids from 5 to 18, and if they were up here and talking about their story, they'd probably be a bit hesitant. Any of us who are kind of fresh on our grief journey are a little bit hesitant to share. But they'll start to share about how, we all cry, we all are sad and mad, but we also, have fun. We're still kids. However, the thing that makes me the most proud is when you ask these kids, do they want to grow up and be a buddy volunteer, which our buddy volunteers are volunteers that work with the younger kids. If you ask them that question, do you want to come back and help others? Their hands shoot up so fast. And to me, that is success, because that is the cycle of the compassion, of the empathy, of the love. That is the world where it is okay to grieve. And I will work my entire life to make sure that world gets bigger and bigger.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I really appreciate each of you guys highlighting one of the cross-cutting themes, which is a sense of community, right? A sense of togetherness, whether that's through grieving or supporting one another. That it involves other people and it involves supporting one another. And so, when you think about the student audience here, with a lot of them still in high school and college, what would you recommend in terms of resources? Things that whether they're books or websites or different TED Talks that might help them to overcome obstacles as they go on in their personal and professional journeys. Kate, let's start with you on that. Resources.
I think the most powerful tool is your peers. Resilience and how you process the tough parts of life. It's just not something you can prepare for. I never thought my mom would die. That was my biggest kind of pivot in my life. I'm sure, as you heard from Starshell, she never expected that to happen in her life. Never expected our communities to be destroyed. But when that happens, it's what you do with that makes the difference. I've come to learn there are really two people in this world. There are victims and there are survivors. And the victims ask, why me? And the survivors ask, who can this help? They may not ask it the next day. For me, it took 7 years. But when you get to a place where you look at your own losses and grievances and adversities as, okay, this is happening to me because it's bigger than me. And how can I have that lens to go out and make sure that it's easier for the next generation? My loss was my mother. No one gets through life without hardship. It's what you do in that moment that will ultimately determine the trajectory of your life.
Great perspective. Brandon?
Yeah, I agree. I think community is super important. What happened to me I witnessed that it happened to many people. So I wasn't isolated. I felt like, my pain is reflected in that family as well. And so that community, that being able to link together and lean on each other was super important. But also legacy is important too, understanding that we come from a legacy of alchemists who turn pain into beauty. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a big fan of history. So any reference of history that you realize that it's sort of like a cheat code to the present, because there's nothing you can face today that somebody in the past didn't face and overcome. And so referencing those moments from individuals in history was always important for me. To understand that, whether it be Negro spirituals and from enslaved people, whether it be the blues and jazz, there was always this tradition when it comes to the arts of how do you turn pain into beauty and pain into passion. And so that's what I was reflecting on. That's what I was always, that was like my barometer of what's possible. I'm like, well, if this happened then, and what I'm going through now is easy. And so that was always a big part of my survival. So I would say any reference of any historic biographies, autobiographies, understanding that every great story is woven with pain and struggle. You know what I mean? And that was always a huge support for me.
Great. And Starshell, how about you? Resources.
Yeah, it's kind of good to hear everybody say what their different resources are, because the truth of the matter is there are so many different resources for everybody, because everybody's different and everybody grieves differently and everybody overcomes differently. So whether it's Kate and her saying to peer-to-peer support or community, or looking in the past for people that you admire and how they dealt with things, whether it's artists that you love and look up to and look at where they've come from and how far they've gone, I would say that my biggest resource is spirituality. I'm very spiritual, so I love Joel Osteen, and I love T.D. Jakes, and I'm very rooted and grounded in my faith. So every time that I'm kind of going through something, I refer back to the Bible and back to my spirituality and things that I feel like are bigger than me and bigger than anyone else. I kind of am directly connected to Source, and I call Source God. And any time that we're feeling too low and like we can't make it, I know that I could be strengthened through him. But again, what I do in my work and with Birthday Girl is we're working to create a toolbox of resources, whether it, like I said, be peer-to-peer or community. It's about looking at the spectrum and say if spirituality isn't for you, then hey, look at an artist who's showing their life and how they've gone from the bottom all the way to where they are. Or look at someone in history. So there's a plethora. I want to encourage you guys to know that there's no one right answer to this question, and there's no one way or one source that you're always going to go to. It's always going to be seasons. It's always going to be based on what you're going through in that moment. And I want you to know that there's a lot of different resources that you can go to, and feel free to explore those resources and see what makes you feel good and what makes you feel encouraged in the moment. And jot it down. Say, okay, well, that made me feel good when I was able to, listen to a song that uplifted me. Or, hey, that made me feel good when I listened to this TED Talk or whatever. So I definitely want you guys to, this is a very important part of the journey of overcoming tough times, is to understand what's in your toolbox, because it's different for every individual.
Fantastic perspectives. Thank you all. Guys, how about a round of applause for our panelists here? Awesome. All right, and now we're going to turn it over to you guys for some audience questions. I think we have a couple of mics here in the audience. If there's maybe at least 2 or 3 students that have a question, let's go ahead and start with you. And if you want to direct it toward one of our panelists.
B'Mike, you said that you do portraits. What tips do you have on shaping? And what tip do you suggest for like the cleanest, thinnest lines?
Awesome, practical question.
So, yeah, thank you for that question. What medium do you use?
Right now I airbrush, but I want to start getting into graffiti. I'm still in the toy, like kind of, I'm kind of like in the toy era right now. Like, you know what I mean? I haven't,
For those that don't know, toy is like what people define like
a new
newbies. And I'm not a graffiti artist, people. I just use spray paint. But no, so I use spray paint, and spray paint was one of the things that excited me about creating large scale, because it allows you to work large and allows you to work fast. I think there's like 3 factors with spray paint, just on terms of like the can you use, the tip you use, the distance you are from the wall. Those all factor in on terms of how easy it is to shade and fade and all those things like that. But definitely experience with anything you're doing. It's all about how much time you put into it. I was painting for a good 2 years before I really wanted people to see what I was doing. So I was like constant 2 years straight of just wake up, go to sleep, like working on the craft. So that's a huge part of it, just putting time into it, you know what I mean? And that's with anything, music, writing, anything, it's like you put the time into it, it's gonna reflect, the growth will reflect. So that's what I would suggest, just keep doing it, but legally though, Yeah.
That's right, great answer. All right, is there another, let's maybe take someone from this side. Question, yeah? Get a mic up there. And again, if you want to direct it to one of our specific panelists, that'd be great.
I have a broad question and a direct question. The broad question is, how do you handle being able to get up on stage and talk about turning your pain into passion without it being uncomfortable? Is there ever a point where it gets comfortable? And for Starshell, what advice do you have for a songwriter or singer who's trying to get in the business? Like, how did you become in a position to be able to write songs for other artists?
Okay, so I think that I'll address the broad question first, which was how long does it take before you're comfortable? So when I was in college, as I told you guys, I lost my sister in high school, and then when I went to college, it was really an exploration for me, and an exploration through my grief. And I learned something called the grief cycle. And I identified where I was in the grief. What the grief cycle is it says when you lose someone, you're going to go through this, and this. And I can't exactly tell you what all the this is, but if you look it up, you'll find it. And I identified where I was in the grief cycle. And where I was at that point was denial. I was in straight up denial. Like, I had a college roommate for 3 years. She had no idea that my sister had passed away. So it's not like I would talk about her as if she was still here. Like I wasn't like, yeah, at Christmas we hung out, but it wasn't like I told her that I had lost my sister. So I was in heavy denial, and I saw on the cycle that eventually I would get to the place where I could use my pain for passion or my tragedy for triumph, and I was like, nah. But then I was like, well, this wouldn't kind of be in a textbook, this wouldn't be proven if that wasn't the case. And what helped me is the information and understanding that, you know, it would happen. So I allowed myself to go through the process to where that would become the case. And only very recently, so I lost my sister when I was in high school, and then I, right out of college, got into the music industry. And even then, I wasn't comfortable talking about losing my sister, especially losing her to suicide. So then I just started like using innuendos to talk about it and just talking about mental health in general. Then I got more and more specific. So it's different with every person. It will take a lot of time for anyone to get to the point where they're able to sit on stage, say I lost my sister, say I lost her from suicide, and then give advice about it. So it's different for everyone, I will say, but for me it was a very long time before I was able to harness my strength. But for others, it could be a very short time. So it just depends on how you work your way through the grief cycle and get to a place where you're feeling empowered to use your story to help others. Because as Kate said, that's one of the biggest purposes everyone has, is that your hardships are mostly always the thing that's going to catapult you into your passion, into helping others. I believe that's what we're all here to do. And then for your other question, the specific question on what advice I would give to anyone who's a young individual trying to get into the music industry, writing, and being an artist, I would say stay true to who you are, stay an individual. Don't ever look at what is going on right now and think you have to fit into that mold, because I think that that's something that a lot of people do, and then they become very, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but it's like everyone sounds and looks and feels just like the person right before them, right? But you are unique. You've gone through unique things. Your life story is so beautiful because it's just yours. And so I would always say for a young artist, draw from that as much as you can. Stay authentic to that as much as you can, because people will try to sway you to do other things and to sound other ways. I remember when I first got into the music industry, they wanted me to, I don't know if you guys remember the Pussycat Dolls, but they wanted me to take Nicole Scherzinger's spot in the Pussycat Dolls. And I was like, I don't know if this is necessarily congruent with what I want my ultimate message to be. This isn't congruent with what my writing style is. So I turned down that offer, and it materialized into me doing exactly what I really wanted to be doing, which is working on 808s and Heartbreak with Kanye West. You know what I mean? So it's like, thank you. So when you're able to have that integrity and know who you are and what you want, you'll go really, really far. And people will find you through you doing you. You're welcome.
Awesome, and we really want to underscore that last theme about authenticity. That's probably one of the most valuable traits that we each have as individuals. Do we have time for a last question? Are we wrapping up? Yep, one more. How about you right there? Yeah.
Hi, my question is geared toward Mr. B'Mike. My name is Kiana, and I'm a senior film and production student at school. And my question is, what advice would you have for someone who wants to start producing their own content, but has so many ideas and doesn't know where to start and feels limited?
No, I mean, I think that's the opposite. If you have so many ideas, and I mean, start on one. I think the difference between you starting out and even when I started out and some of my instructors starting out is that there's so many more ways, gain points of entry, whether it be, this, whether it be YouTube, whether it be, all the different social media platforms that you're able to just put your content out there. I think echoing back to what she just said about being authentic is a huge part of which one of those ideas you begin with. Is like, which one is more true to you that makes it only you're able to tell that story. Who better to tell whatever that particular story is than you because of your own experience. So I think that if you can sort of streamline it from that perspective and say, okay, this one is me right here. This one is, I'm most confident about this this particular narrative or this particular story, I think that's the one that you're going to find you become more passionate about, because if somebody gives you a critique and say, well, no, that's not, you're going to be like, nah, that's exactly what it is because I lived that. And so I would say that that's where I would begin. But within the context of what's possible, I mean, the more than ever, the playing field is kind of, I don't want to say it's level, but more than ever, it's at a space where someone like you can produce something and millions of people tune in. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that when I first started. You know, I remember seeing YouTube being introduced and people scratching their head like, what is this? And now we all know, you know, there's many cases of success that came exactly from that route. So I would just do it. Like, you know, the more time you waste thinking about what you should do is the time you could have been doing it. You know what I mean?
Awesome. And it turns out we have time for at least a couple more questions. Let's take someone from here, the very, very back there. Yeah, and then we're going to take someone from over here, my man, in the blazer. Is there a microphone for this young lady?
Are y'all taking a selfie?
There we go.
Put 'em on black.
Mike's making its way.
Hi, my name is Makeda Phillips. I would say, how do you all manage to create content or even work when sometimes, if it can, your grief gets in the way? Like, how do you get past that?
Kate, do you want to field that for?
Sure. I mean, part of my theory around grief and loss is that they're triggers, that this is a journey, this is something that will come into your life at different times throughout the rest of your life. And it may be compounded by another life event. And by accepting that, it allows me, I think, to always know, again, that I'm a survivor and that moment can empower me to do something else. You know, I'll take this moment just to kind of vie again for all around the stories. I mean, creative arts today, especially in the world of entertainment and film, and just visual arts is, you know, a wonderful thing where people are gravitated towards because you can express yourself and you get audience around it to validate it or to accept it or, you know, to talk about it. And, you know, all of those are different vehicles, right? But they're all rooted in that story. And I just think that as you're thinking about whatever vehicle that may be, a wonderful nexus to start is your own story, is that point of pain. And if that pain, again, is triggered throughout your life, like never think that you're past that moment of where you can come back to that nexus of that story and unpack that grief and unpack the feelings that come with it. And look at the different vehicles that it can show up at. You know, songwriting, artists, for me, it was, you know, physically building a nonprofit organization. I never thought in a million years that would be my path in life. I mean, that was not what I set out to do. I was going to be Oprah's protege if she had one. But so I just keep your mind open to that, I think, and know that those grievances, those points of despair and of sadness can be points where you identify and attach yourself to love and to empowerment. And that's how you can use it for good in the world, it being about something bigger than you. That has been what's kind of got me through it.
Great answer. Great answer. And lastly, over here. Yep. There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miles Harlan. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And my question is really for everyone. It originally started with Starshell, so I don't know if you want to answer it, but it could be for anyone. How do you know when you're being authentic? How do you know when you're really being true to yourself and what you're feeling? You know, we go through life and we're just like, oh, I'm good, I'm okay. You know, it's for a bigger purpose. But at one point, do you like take the service out to actually serve yourself to go back to serving that purpose? How do you know when there's a deficiency or when there's a void that you're trying to fill?
Great question.
That's a really good question.
Right.
It's a really good question. And it's a really complex answer. Because you're right, we're ever changing. Like, and especially me, I'm a Gemini and I'm an artist. Hey! And I'm an artist, so I'm really crazy. So one day I'm like, all the way over here, and the other day I'm all the way over there. So, but that's natural for everybody, and we go through those things. And I think staying authentic to you is being exactly where you are in that moment.
Yes.
Right? So if you've noticed, like a lot of different artists, and I'll use Kanye for example, 808s and Heartbreak was a big pivot from who he normally is, but he wrote the record because he was going through a heartbreak, and a person who was writing with him was grieving, right? So it's like, we wrote that from that space, but then he wrote his next album from a whole other space because he liked going to, and I don't know that this is true, but he liked going to clubs or whatever. And you notice a lot of artists do that. Whatever they're going through in the phase that they're in their life, they express it in that moment, and that's being authentic. But I do believe that throughout everything, there's an anchor. An anchor that says, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what I'm always gonna go back to. That's what an anchor is. So if you don't have that, and you kind of don't have those parameters around your intentions and what you want in life and your purpose, I think that the most important thing is to explore. Because as you're exploring, you'll find what feels good, what really grounds you, what you really wanna stand for. And until you find that, you'll kind of be all over the place. But once you do, it's really living in your purpose. And that takes time. So
I'll just answer it really quickly because I think that is such an awesome question that I wish I would have gotten or heard an answer to like 2 decades before I actually received it. And it is a lot like what Starshell is saying. We all have this thing called our gut. Right? We have that, it's something, it's our spirit, it's something that drives us, it's with us day one, kind of throughout the journey. The problem though is that we have to learn to be present to really know and understand and learn about our gut. And that may sound really like, be present, meditation, all that stuff. But I gotta tell you, it is, especially this world is kind of making that really, really hard for you to learn how to do that. And if you can just start to think about how you can be present, not future trip, not feel guilt from the past, find that special point and align that with your gut, that's when that spark happens. I'm not here to say that that's easy, especially when you're young, but I found it in my 30s, and I was lucky. I found it before, but I was really able to understand it and reflect on it later. So I would say those 2 things. You guys just did a meditation. I mean, those are things that can help you just slow down in life. One of the big things for me was, what are we all rushing for? Because the end line is not something I'm trying to get to faster than I need to. Right?
Absolutely.
So James was talking about mantra. That's kind of one that I have to say often to myself. Like, what's the rush? Enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and try to acknowledge where you are and who you're with those steps.
I think in saying that too, because I think we're like collaboratively answering the question for you. But to conclude that, it's like understanding that it's okay where I am right now. Yes. Right? So you don't have to have it all figured out. So if that aha moment, Oprah calls it an aha moment, happens in your 30s and you're able to put it all together, then that's great. That's your story, that's your purpose. But at the same time, like if you're feeling like today you love one thing, go full throttle with it. And tomorrow you love another, and I'm being dramatic, but do that because that's what's authentic to you.
And just to piggyback off of that, from a mental health perspective, you guys are highlighting some really key things. One is to appreciate that self-discovery and self-awareness are an evolving process, right? It's not something that happens overnight. But I think as you become more self-aware, trying to figure out what are those core values, right? When it comes to compassion or service or gratitude, what are those core values that keep you anchored, as Starshell said, throughout different stages of your life? And how can you be intentional about living in alignment with those core values so that no matter what stressors come or circumstances come, you're still lockstep with those core values. So fantastic question. Guys, how about a round of applause for our panelists here today?